Welcome to Eye on the Cure, a podcast from the Foundation Fighting Blindness, providing science research, news, and insights about the world of vision and blinding diseases.
Happy Wednesday, Vision Warriors, and welcome to Eye on the Cure. I'm your host, Maddie Mossman, with the Foundation Fighting Blindness. For those listeners who might be new to the podcast, the Foundation's urgent mission is to drive research for treatments and cures for people affected by inherited blinding diseases and AMD. I'm here to learn alongside you as we explore the latest vision research, news, advocacy, accessibility, and personal stories that matter to the blind and low vision community. Now, let's get our eye on the cure. In this week's episode with Dr. Patrick Staropoli. When Dr. Patrick Staropoli graduated at the top of his class at Harvard, he became the first person in his family to go to college. He went on to medical school at the University of Miami and then completed his residency and fellowship at the Bascom Palmer Eye Institute. He is a practicing retina specialist at Retina Consultants of Texas today. What makes Dr. Staropoli unique is that while he was excelling at all things academic and becoming a retinal surgeon, he also pursued his other passion, racing cars. In 2014, he became the first medical doctor in NASCAR history to win a race. Dr. Staropoli's story is an inspiring one about how perseverance and grit helped him accomplish not just one, but two impressive dreams. Now, he's combining both worlds to advocate for patients and raise awareness about blinding diseases. The Foundation Fighting Blindness recently partnered with Dr. Staropoli for the remainder of the 2026 NASCAR season, and we are so excited to have him here today. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Maddie, thank you very much for the very nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So can you tell me exactly where you are right now?
So I'm hanging out in the hotel room out in Sonoma, California. So we're racing at Sonoma Raceway this weekend and two events. One of them is the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. That's the series I'm competing in full time this year. It's the number 2 division of NASCAR. So we are about a little past halfway through the season in that. And then I'm also racing in the ARCA series this weekend to help get some extra laps on this track. It's a new one for me. And I'm excited that we have Foundation Fighting Blindness on the car for the ARCA race this weekend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. So even now you are on the road to a race, but you're still making time for balancing your work in the blind and low vision community by talking to me today. That is incredible. That's exactly why we wanted you on the podcast today. I want to start at the beginning because your path is such a unique one. What first drew you into the worlds of medicine and racing?
It's a pretty interesting story. I mean, I grew up in a racing environment. So my dad and my grandfather raced when I was a kid. They were car mechanics for a living. So basically my weekly routine, I would go to school, then go to the shop after school and work on, customers' cars with them. And then at night we'd work on the race cars and go racing on the weekend. And I spent pretty much every Saturday night of my childhood going to the racetrack with my dad and helping him out. The crazy part of the story, I guess my first exposure to medicine, my dad was actually involved in a really bad racing accident when I was 12 or 13 years old. And the gas pedal on his race car got stuck wide open and he hit a wall head on. Sounds really bad. And it was. They had to airlift him, from the car to the hospital. And they saved his life. This was down in Miami at Jackson Memorial Hospital. And it wasn't like at that point in time, I said, oh man, I want to grow up and become a doctor. But I just remember being amazed by the whole process, the team of people that took care of him, and just the power of medicine. University of Miami is a research center for people actually involved in motor vehicle accidents. And so by my dad going to that hospital, he might have had a better outcome than had he gone somewhere else. So the power of medicine, the power of research was in my head from an early age. And I just kind of had these two passions for racing and for medicine that have each grown over time.
Wow, that is a really incredible story. Were you there in Miami?
Yeah, I was there. I was at the race when it happened, and then at the hospital pretty much every day. He was in the hospital for 3 months after that. So it was, a pretty extended process. And the crazy part about all of it is, I went on to continue, to start racing actually after that, even though my mom wasn't a huge fan of it.
I can imagine.
You can imagine, like even at baseline, but then having had everything that happened with my dad. Then eventually when I went to medical school, it was at University of Miami. So I ended up being a
Right.
medical student in the same trauma bays in the same hospital where they saved my dad. So
Full circle moment.
yeah, exactly. A complete full circle moment. And, it's kind of played out that way multiple times over my
Yeah.
career. So I definitely think having that experience early on is what set me down this path.
That is so cool. So then you mentioned about going to school in Miami and
Mhm,
pursuing a medical school training and putting racing on hold. What
mhm.
was that season of life like for you? How did you navigate making that choice while still holding on to your passion for racing?
Yeah, it was tricky. So I think the most complete answer to it is I never quite gave one up for the other. I tried as much as I could throughout my medical training, and then even when I was in college and flying back and forth to race as much as I could. Now, compared to professional, race car driver, a lot of these kids, they start when they're 4 or 5 years old and they race, 50, 60 times a year, every year growing up. And I say because of school and always putting that first, because that was the deal I had with my parents and my sponsors and my or anyone I drove for was like, you need to take school seriously. And I did. I would race anywhere from like 5 to 15 times a season. When I was in medical school, it was probably more like 4 or 5 times a year. So whenever I had the opportunity, I tried to get behind the wheel and keep my skills up and hope that one day I would get an opportunity to compete full time on a national level. And that's what I've been able to do this year. So a lot of time management on both sides, a lot of people in the medicine community who understand the passion and the time it takes to do this, and a lot of understanding from my race teams, the time it takes to be in practice or be in school and the requirements of both. So on my own, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It's just a lot of support on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I definitely later on, I want to dive into what that schedule looks like now. But then, was there ever a moment where you questioned whether you could realistically do both at that time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a lot of time I spent questioning it. I mean, there was some times where, in residency, you would do like a 24-hour shift, and then I'd hop in the car with my dad, and, the racetracks from Miami were like 4 or 5 hours away. I would sleep all the way up in the car, hop out, jump in the race car and go race. And so it's a
That is
it's a
crazy.
huge commitment. Yeah, I know. Not the
Yeah.
greatest decision, but I was well rested by the time I
Yes.
got in the seat. But yeah, I think anytime you're committed to doing anything that's really challenging, whether it's getting through medical school or becoming a professional athlete. And it takes like a lot of determination and definitely being spread a little bit thin on this schedule in both areas. There were points where I questioned, why am I trying to keep the juggle up? But it's always been important to me to try to unite my passions. And there's been several instances, I guess, through my career where we've used the racing platform to promote things that are important in medicine. That's obviously something we're trying to do together with our partnership for Foundation Fighting Blindness. And I think that tying those two things together in order to raise awareness and help people is really what drives me when the going gets tough. That's why we're really out there. So
So would you say at that point, when you were in medical school, that was what was motivating you? Because now we know that you use your platform to
mhm.
help with both. But at that point, what was motivating you through those years of training?
Yeah, I think the motivation through training obviously is to get to the end point. You get
Right,
into
right.
medical school because you want to be able to make a difference in people's lives. And I think during medical school, becoming a professional race car driver wasn't on my radar. It was something that I did for fun that I loved, that if I could do some good through that would be great. But definitely the primary focus was getting my training and being prepared to go out into the world and to make a difference in people's lives. So that's, I think, what got me through the long days and nights. And it's been cool now being on the other side of it and being in practice for a couple of years, really seeing that all that work and those late nights and the stress of, being on little sleep and having to make like important decisions, all of that prepares you for when you're practicing on your own and being able to do that stuff reflexively because it's so well ingrained into your head at that point.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think what is so fascinating about your career is that on the surface level, retinal surgery and NASCAR seem completely different. But
Mhm.
I'm sure that there are skills and experiences that do cross over. I mean, both require precision, quick decision making, staying calm under pressure. I am
Mhm.
so curious. Can you take us into your mind during a high speed race and a high stakes surgery?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think there are a lot of similarities, and you
Yeah.
and you pointed out a bunch of them there. I mean, it's a similar area of focus that you go into when you're concentrating on anything that is high stakes, like you said. The phrase people in racing like to you get into a flow state, so everything is just zeroed in on the task at hand. I think the instruments we use in racing and surgery are very similar. When I'm doing an operation, I have a light pipe in one hand, like a little flashlight, and a vitrector in the other, which is like a little instrument that we use to fix the retina. Under one foot, you have your scope pedal. So you're moving things around to focus your microscope. And then the other one is actually the pedal for the vitrector. And so the more you push it, the more it, does its thing inside of the eye. So being smooth with your hands and feet, it's critical to having a good surgery. And in racing, we say smooth is fast. And I think the same thing applies when we operate. If you're smooth inside of the eye, if you're precise with your movements, you're going to have better outcomes. The same thing when you're 30 laps into a run at a racetrack where the tires wear out a lot, being very smooth on the gas pedal, smooth on the brake pedal, that equates to speed. So it all comes down to these really fine micro movements. I mean, one is a 3,000 pound car flying around a track at 200 miles an hour. And the other one, you're talking about, microns within an eye. But the thought process you have to have when you do it, I think, is really similar. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels that I think cross between the two. And being a race car driver, I think, has made me better at being a surgeon, and vice versa. Being a surgeon has allowed me to be better a race car driver.
I did not know that there was two pedals that during surgery you're using.
Mhm.
That's pretty cool, the parallel of being a race car driver and then also
Right. Yeah.
car. That is so cool. I didn't know that.
Exactly. Yep.
So which environments do you feel more tense, the operating room or the racetrack?
They're both tense in their own ways. So I think in terms of, what's the most important, anytime we're doing surgery and you're trying to fix someone's eye, I mean, any move you make has a permanent lasting effect on how that person sees the world. And that's something that I don't take lightly. When you're operating, you're trying to be as careful as possible, doing the most good and having the least, negative side effects. You're trying to accomplish your goal in the best way possible. So you're very methodical. It's very like thought intensive process. Everything you do, will have a lasting implication. So that's intense. And then some of, our patients, obviously very difficult social situations. There's some patients, that I think are most difficult surgeries are our diabetic patients, and they have a lot going on besides their eyes. So those things really weigh on you. So that's what makes surgery intense. And racing, on the other hand, is a different kind of intensity because it's competitive. You don't really have competitive surgery. On a racetrack, you're just trying to go out and be the fastest possible. And that means taking risks. And that's kind of the opposite of what I do when I'm in the operating room. You want to maximize your potential for having a good finish. And sometimes that means throwing caution to the wind. There's also, with our races, over 1 million people watching on television, like every move you make, and there's instant replays, and you don't have instant replays of what we do in the operating room. So there's a higher level of scrutiny, I think, and a higher level of competition. And that's what makes it intense. But in terms of what's at stake, at the end of the day, obviously, I think what I do as a surgeon and how I affect someone's life, that kind of outweighs everything. And that's where you want to be the most careful. So long answer, but I think a lot about that.
No, not at all.
They're very unique. Yeah.
Especially talking about the millions of people watching. I didn't even take that into effect. I would personally think it's high stakes because you are racing at high speeds, going round and round, your personal safety. But I didn't even think about the fact that there's replays of that also.
Right, exactly. And there's so many people that are passionate about this sport, and it's easy to, I guess, go back and comment on, oh, well, this guy should have done it this way or that one that way.
Right.
So it's very different than discussing a case with your colleagues after you've finished the surgery. So it's interesting to compare the two environments.
Yeah. So what does preparation look like before surgery for you versus a race?
Yeah. So depending on the case, I mean, sometimes it requires a couple of weeks of planning if it's very complicated and you need the assistance of other doctors. I think when I prepare for a case, I just review all of the imaging from the last several visits I have with that person. If they've had previous surgeries, you kind of delve into those operative notes and try to understand what's been done, what's been tried already, and then what your approach is going to be. And I'm still kind of old school. I have my little notepad where I, handwrite my notes and make a little diagram and basically just try to walk myself through. Yeah, doctor's handwriting.
Yeah.
I will say my handwriting's pretty clear. It's just really small.
Okay. All right.
It's not gibberish, but it is very tiny. Yes, I pack a lot of information onto a tiny paper that I can take with me. But yeah, I usually just try to map out my day. Even the order that we do the cases in sometimes is important for the ebb and flow of the surgery day. So I try to plan everything out to, again, just maximize my effectiveness and what I can do to help the patient. And, the day before, you're running through in your head all the steps that you're going to take so that when you show up on surgery day, you have as successful of a day as possible. So the prep is sort of similar to the racing. I mean, it's obviously different subject matter, but before I go to a racetrack, like this weekend, heading to a new track for the first time, I watch a lot of old tape from these racetracks. I try to get some onboard cameras from drivers who are good that have competed here before. And then same deal, take notes, map out the track and just say for each corner, this is where I want to lift off the gas and this is the part of the corner I want to turn in. And so before you even get into that environment, whether it's the operating room or the race car, you already know hands and feet what you're going to be doing each
Right.
step of the way.
Right. That's so interesting. I didn't know that for racing that you already know what you're going to do as you're going around. Is there a
Mhm.
quick time decision though, based on what your competitors are doing?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
you go in
I would
with a
imagine.
plan and things change pretty quick. So
Yeah.
yeah, when you're out there by yourself, you can sort of stick to, this is the optimal line and this is the optimal way to use the gas and the brake. But as soon as you throw in 37 other cars and they're all going nuts and driving all over the
Right.
track and there's crashes and you need to avoid them and the track can actually change throughout the course of a day. As the weather changes and more rubber gets laid down on the racetrack, what was optimal at the beginning of the race isn't necessarily the best way to approach it at the end. So it is sort of a moving target, and you always have to be on top of it throughout the race.
Right. That's so interesting. What excites you in these environments, both in racetrack and in surgery?
And in
What,
surgery,
yeah, what are you holding as grounding yourself in them that is exciting you?
yeah, the racing side, it's easy to say. I think just the whole thing is exciting. One of my favorite moments of any race weekend is right before the race. We all line up on pit road. They do the national anthem, and all the teams they stand in rows, and it's just such a cool moment. You have like the flyover at our big races. There'll be like a fighter jet that comes over, and it's so cool. It's when it hits you, like, wow, this is right at the top level of motorsports in North America. And I get to be here with my family, my friends, people who supported me, through 20 years of racing. And we're getting, set here on pit road, ready to fire off for the race. So I think those are special moments that get me amped up. Obviously, being successful on the racetrack, making the right adjustment and working your way to the front is exciting, but you're usually so focused, you don't have time to be excited until after the race. Those are the big wins there. I think in my medical career, it's a bit different. We have exciting things that happen sometimes, like someone comes in with an emergency retinal detachment and you have to hurry up and get them to the operating room and you reattach the retina and you save their vision, long term for the rest of their life. That's
Oh,
really exciting that you can intervene at a critical time and make a big difference. Just as many, times that you can have big wins like that, sometimes in our field, it's the opposite. You have patients who've been through a lot and they get referred to you for a third or fourth opinion. And you want to be able to make sure that you have exhausted all options because people sometimes just want to know that everything that can be done with our modern tools and technology has been done. And if not, there's this one stone that's still left that we can unturn and try to help you. Those are, I guess, in terms of levels of excitement, the less exciting cases, but sometimes it's just more reassurance more than anything. And I think getting people referred to the right resources. A lot of times there's patients with low vision who don't know that low vision specialists even exist, that there are devices and techniques and things like that to make day-to-day living easier.
yeah.
And so sometimes just getting people connected with that and they come back and see you and like, oh my gosh, I can function on my own now. I can get this done, that done, other thing. Sometimes less is more. And surgery is not always the answer to everything. And it's really just a matter of functionality. And so I think when you can make a difference in someone's lives from that perspective, that's rewarding as well.
Wow. I love the way you speak about that. I really admire the way you think about it, especially as a surgeon. That's really cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
Another thing I admire about your story is that after building a successful medical career, you continue to chase racing in a really intentional way. You're going all in on racing at 36, competing against drivers who are just now beginning their careers. What made now feel like the right time to fully pursue that dream again?
Yeah, I think that it's never quite a decision of when the time happens. It's sort of
Right.
when it comes to find you. And this has been a dream of mine my whole life. Like I said, I've been racing over 20 years now, and I think it's 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million that things would sort of line up to get this opportunity. But while I've continued to race and practice the last couple of years, I had the opportunity within my own practice to start a nonprofit. It was called Driving to Fight Blindness. The goal being we were trying to raise awareness for what we're doing within our group and research and how we're trying to help patients and put that on a larger scale. So I think getting the foundation started and then racing alongside of that kind of garnered some attention. of some of these teams in the national series. And then that's what sort of led to, I guess, a partial schedule last year where I ran about 14 races. And then the full up time opportunity got presented to me this year over the off season. And so it's just one of those things that you can't really predict that it was going to happen. But once it did, I knew that it was the right time. There is an expiration date, I think, on race car drivers in terms of when you're in your prime and your ability to do it. And this was just an opportunity where, again, I could combine the two things I'm most passionate about, retinas and race cars, and make a difference. And it was a no-brainer for me once I knew that this was a real possibility that I needed to do it this year.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. And so on a practical level, we've talked about before, and I wanted to come back to it. What does it actually look like balancing the NASCAR schedule with patient care and surgery?
Yeah, so it was tricky last year because I was practicing full time and traveling for the races. And so,
Wow.
some weeks it would be operating on Monday, full day clinic, Tuesday, Wednesday, fly out Wednesday night, get to North Carolina where we would, work on the simulator and prep for the weekend, then fly out Thursday to wherever the race was, compete in the race, get back to Houston Sunday, and then be back at work on Monday. So that was an average week when I was racing last year. And, this year with it being a full-time opportunity, we race, from Valentine's Day all the way till the first week of November, 33 races. So it is super time consuming. So my group in Houston there has fortunately allowed me to take a sabbatical this year. So I'm full-time at the race shop, working with the team, traveling to the racetracks on the weekend. I'm still involved in our conferences and research and academic speaking as much as I can be in between, but the day-to-day practice, I'm taking a little break for now, and then I'll be back right when our season ends in November.
But you're still holding it on a platform by advocating through your passion for racing. So even though you're taking a sabbatical, you're still having a huge impact within the blind and low vision world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the goal. So, the car this year is the Syfovre Chevrolet. So Syfovre is a medication for geographic atrophy. And by having that car on track, we're trying to raise awareness for age-related macular degeneration and geographic atrophy, and letting people know that there are now treatments out there available to them. Whereas, for all of history, there had been no treatment for this blinding condition. So again, it goes back to using this platform and using the engagement that motorsports brings to raise awareness for things that are important to our patients.
Right, right. And, you bring up AMD and GA, and it's probably a good segue into touching on some of the vision conditions our community faces and that you might treat as a retinal surgeon. So for listeners who may not be familiar, age-related macular degeneration, or AMD, is a retinal disease that can lead to loss of central vision. AMD can move through advanced stages, including one called geographic atrophy. So, for those of us that are still learning about these conditions, can you explain what's actually happening in the eye and how AMD and geographic atrophy can impact vision?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as the name implies, AMD is age-related macular degeneration. So the biggest risk factor, unfortunately, is age, experience at life. So as people get older, you can accumulate these little yellow bumps underneath the retina, and they're called drusen. And as you collect more drusen there, it leads to some dysfunction in the central retinal area. This can lead to distortion or blurry vision. And like you mentioned, as it progresses over time, AMD can kind of go in two different directions. One is called wet macular degeneration, and that's where these abnormal blood vessels can grow underneath the retina and they can leak or bleed, and that can lead to vision loss. And there's a lot of medications that we use to treat and control those abnormal blood vessels to preserve vision long term. And then the other way that it can go is the very advanced form of dry macular degeneration, and that's what's called geographic atrophy. That's where the retina, instead of functioning like it's supposed to, it sort of thins out. I tell my patients it's like a carpet or a rug that you step on too many times and it gets really thin where the footprints are. So GA is essentially, it's like that. And so the corresponding effect is that you have these blind spots in your vision, and you can also have distortion around those areas where the patches of atrophy are. And so what makes GA so difficult, it is very slow moving. And I think historically we've just thought of it as a slow moving process and that there was no treatment for it. And so people would get diagnosed with it and say, sorry, we'll check back, in several years, and that's all there was. And what's been really exciting these last few years is the approval of medications like Syfovre that are used to slow down the progression of geographic atrophy. So it preserves what I call retina real estate so that you have functioning areas of retina for a longer period of time than if the patient wasn't treated. So it's a really exciting time to be a retina specialist. I mean, even when I first started training, there was no treatment for it. And so now to be out in practice and be able to offer patients something where previously there was no treatment for the disease, it's a really exciting time to be in retina.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The clinical trials that are out and slowing the progression, that's huge because those can change the impact of someone's day-to-day life. Can you speak on that and how you've seen that through your patients and how it has affected their day-to-day life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, the name of the game in a lot of retinal diseases is preserving retinal tissue as much as possible. There rarely is any kind of treatment that's a cure-all or a reversal. And what we're trying to do at this point is to preserve tissue for as much as possible so that when there are newer generations of medications down the line, that there's more left to work with. And I think when you have, the choice between observation and doing nothing versus in the correct cases, a patient who is a good candidate, giving them a treatment that slows the progression of things down, that's a huge leap forward for our field. In the past, you just felt like your hands were tied and you'd have these really sad conversations where you say, there's nothing you can do for this particular condition. And now we're getting to the point where we say, oh yeah, there's an approved treatment for that. Or, oh, there's a trial that we can enroll you in. Or I know of a company that there may be a trial coming up in the next couple of months or years, and we put you in a database and you can be notified when that time comes. And that's, I think, true for all the conditions we treat, whether it's macular degeneration or diabetes. Genetic or inherited retinal diseases is another area with a lot of active research. And so again, it's really exciting to be able to offer that to people. Whereas in the past, your main counseling point was, I'm sorry, we don't have anything that can help you right now. So it's a great time to be a retina specialist.
Yes, yes. And jumping into the blind and low vision community and their day-to-day life, I think your story is especially powerful for this community because so many people living with vision loss are constantly told what they can't do, or maybe they tell themselves that they can't do certain things. What would you say to people who have big dreams that maybe feel unrealistic or out of reach, especially coming from someone who pursued two dreams that were unrealistic and out of reach?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, I guess I can only speak from my personal experience on it. And like you said, it's a very difficult path to becoming anything that you dream about when you're a kid. I think people face a lot of obstacles in their life to getting to that goal. And I obviously had big dreams and a lot of perseverance and determination to never give up on them. I've been told no a million times when it comes to making it in racing or, even applying, or working to get into medical schools and residencies. And you can have millions of no's, and all it takes is that one yes to get to live your dream. And, that's what I'm getting to do this year, racing full time. And I think that, the advice I give to anybody, and obviously, living with low vision, there's obstacles even at a very fundamental level of your daily activities, but is to just have that perseverance and determination and never give up. And all it takes is that one yes to get to do what you want to do. And I think I'm inspired every day by my patients who live with low vision and what I hear about them doing, what they're able to accomplish. And they motivate me, whenever I'm feeling like lazy or can't get something done. And I hear about what they're able to do. I'm like, well, I got to get off my butt and get to work here. So I think that it's just as inspiring to hear about the things that patients with low vision are able to accomplish. And having communities like that where people can share stories, I think is equally motivating as well. So yeah, I would say I'm more thankful for my patients in that situation
Oh,
as motivation for me.
oh, I love that. That's really cool. So you became the first doctor in NASCAR history to win a race, which is an
Mhm.
incredible accomplishment. What did that moment mean to you personally as someone that had to put one dream on hold for the other?
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think there are a lot of doctors trying to accomplish that, but it
Hey,
is a
still,
unique, yeah,
it's
still
cool.
take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's a unique distinction. Yeah, it was a huge moment in my life. I think again, the tug of war between having two different passions and trying to balance the two. At that race, my dad was there. My best friend Anthony from growing up was at the race, and to have those people there to share that moment with you, and that they were there for you during all the blood, sweat, and tears of all the years where you weren't successful and you weren't making it, that meant everything to me. So having that memory is something to look back on and be able to use it as motivation driving forward was really special.
Yeah.
And I think that in a lot of ways, it helped sort of solidify my spot in the sport where I could continue to have the opportunity to race going down the road and to use it to do cool things like we're doing this year. So it was a personally satisfying moment, but I think it also set the stage to be able to continue racing and to do cool things like have Foundation Fighting Blindness on the car this weekend. So it worked out in a lot of ways.
Yes, yeah, that's so cool. The car itself, the picture of it is so awesome. If anyone
Yeah.
hasn't checked it
Thank
out,
you.
please check it out. It is the coolest car out there, hands down.
Yep. It's a great paint scheme. I love it. It looks really good.
Have you had anyone ask questions about it and say, like, what is Foundation Fighting Blindness after seeing the
Yeah,
car?
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So we ran the full, Foundation Fighting Blindness car at the Watkins Glen race. I guess it was about a month ago now. So we had a lot of people interested in it and came up, wanted to know what the foundation was about. Like you said, the paint scheme was really cool. So it, I think, attracted a lot of people to the car. And yeah, I think anytime you show up at the racetrack with a unique initiative or a sponsor, I mean, there's so many that are classic sponsors in motorsports. And then when you get something like Foundation Fighting Blindness and people want to know more about it, it's a really cool thing to be in that position to be able to educate people.
Especially because you can educate people by being a retina specialist.
Yeah.
You know how to talk about it, which is awesome. Why ophthalmology specifically? What drew you toward retinal care and vision research?
So I think that goes back to when I was in college. I actually started off in engineering, thinking I wanted to be an engineer on
Oh,
a race team. And I got a couple semesters into that and I was like, wow, engineering's very, very math intensive.
hard.
And as much as I was interested in it, I sort of became attracted more towards neurobiology. So I switched my major to that. And sort of the foundation for teaching neurobiology is the visual system. So how your retina wires to your occipital lobe in your brain is how they taught us how neurons worked. And so I had a really good understanding of the visual pathways before I even made it to medical school. And I think when I got there, it was something that just sort of came naturally to me because of my background in college. So
Right.
that's what got me interested in it. Then I think being in Miami, having Bascom Palmer Eye Hospital there in our backyard, you can go shadow all the residents and surgeons and attendings there. And I learned so much right off the bat. I thought the surgeries were amazing. I mean, we talked about earlier, you operate through a microscope, you're using your hands and feet. There was a lot of transferable skills from what I was accustomed to doing with a steering wheel and pedals. And it sort of, I don't want to say came naturally to me, but I felt like I could understand it pretty
Right.
quickly on a fundamental level. So all those things attracted me to it. And then obviously the patient component, like we talked about earlier, being able to save someone from vision loss in an emergency situation, you can make such a huge difference. And I'm a very visual person, and I really appreciate the quality of vision, and not like that's my favorite sense, I guess, out of all the ones that I have. And so being able to optimize that for people and save it for them when it's in danger, I think is ultimately what led me down this path.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you remember the first time you were in the operating room and what that was like?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I hadn't thought about it till you just asked me that. The first time I saw an eye surgery was at Bascom Palmer. It was a cataract surgery. Dr. Banta was performing it. He's no longer there. He moved somewhere else, but one of the all-time greatest cataract surgeons. He taught like all the residents for years at Bascom, and he was like incredibly efficient. I mean, he could do a cataract surgery in under 5 minutes, and it was like
Oh,
expert quality. Yeah. Nowadays there's like a lot of laser assisted cataract surgery. He did everything by hand, and I just remember how like efficient and smooth he was. And he had a resident there and he was talking them through the whole surgery as he's doing it, like seamlessly, like a perfect narration while
yeah.
he's also actually
Super
completing the
cool.
task at hand. Yeah, and I just remember being completely mesmerized by
Yeah.
how efficiently he moved, and how precise the surgery was done. So and then it was like that. I think he did, I don't know, 15 or 20 cases that day, and I stayed for a lot of them. But it
Oh,
was
that's
it was super
cool.
impressive, and that's one of those wow moments that stuck with me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Talking about the lasers now, how different are the surgeries from when you first started with advancements in technology?
Yeah, so in the retina field, we don't necessarily use like laser assisted stuff as much as anterior segment surgeons. So like cataract surgeons in particular use laser assistive devices for their cataract surgeries. A lot of our stuff is still done completely by hand. Now there are a lot of newer surgical instruments that are supposed to help us out in more advanced cases. So I like whenever someone comes up with something new, trying it and seeing if it
Yeah.
helps out with the task at hand. But a lot of our stuff is still sort of old school basic instruments that we go back there in the eye and try to fix the retina with.
Wow. And would you say that's similar to NASCAR? Has there been a lot of developments in the cars themselves, or is it pretty similar?
So interesting in NASCAR, there's, the different divisions. So the NASCAR Cup Series, which is, the tippy top, they're more on the cutting edge of technology. So they have a different rear suspension than the cars I race. The motors are fuel injected. So they're very much progressing in a, technology forward sort of direction because it's the premier series. The series I race in, the O'Reilly Auto Parts series, we anchor more towards sort of older car technology. Like our
Okay.
motors still have carburetors on them. The rear
Nice.
ends are truck arm suspension. So it's sort of an homage to the older style stock cars. And
Yeah.
they put on really good racing, which is why they sort of cap it where it's at because the on track competition is good. It helps to control costs a little bit. But it is interesting that even within our series, there's these different divisions. So yeah, I enjoy the cars we race a lot. They're a lot of fun to compete in.
That's so funny, the parallel between surgery and that kind of similar
I know
thing.
is
You have
another one, right?
parallels
Yeah.
everywhere. I think
Everywhere.
every retinal surgeon needs to be a NASCAR driver.
Yeah,
That's what we're
yeah.
basically saying right
They
now.
give you some good perspective. Yeah, we're uncovering all the similarities
Yeah.
today.
Yes. So when you look ahead at the future of retinal
Mhm.
research and treatment development, what do you think gives patients the most hope right now? And what excites you most as a doctor treating patients with vision loss?
Yeah, I think that just the quantity of emphasis on retina research right now is greater than ever. There's more trials, there's more companies trying to develop medications that can help retina patients than ever before. I think the name of the game in research, we have in macular degeneration and diabetes, we have injections that are effective that help patients, but they require, sometimes monthly treatment for the rest of your life. And that burden is a lot. Sometimes people with low vision and other medical issues, having them come in every month for an injection is difficult. So
Right.
I think that the direction we're going is to trying to develop medicines that last for a longer period of time and are just as effective. So you can reduce the treatment burden for the patients, give them better quality of life, less days spent in the clinic waiting for hours on our slow doctors to to try to, even though we're going as fast as we can, it still takes a while. And so I think things that are coming down the pipeline that are exciting are these medicines that last longer. There's some gene therapies where we're trying to get the eye to create the medication on its own so that you don't need as many
Wow.
injections. Yeah, so there's a lot of unique approaches. I don't know which one is going to be the perfect one that works going
Right.
forward or if there'll
Right.
ever be perfect treatments for anything. But as long as people keep trying and are inspired to help our patients with low vision and improve their quality of life as much as possible, I think that that's what's really exciting for me as a treating physician and for patients to look forward to in the future.
I love that. That's a great answer. Because so many of our listeners are part of the blind and low vision community, I gotta ask, are there accessible ways for fans with vision loss to experience NASCAR races? Because now they have a new favorite driver and they're gonna want to participate.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I know just from being at the tracks, there's a lot of, fan assistance available for people, whether it's low vision or mobility disorders, anything like that. The tracks offer assistance to fans who request it ahead of time. I know that service dogs are allowed at racetracks because I've seen them there before and they're very cute dogs. Um, and I would say, even beyond that, to enjoy a race, as much as it is a visual sport, there's so many other senses that are heightened at a racetrack. I mean, you have the sound of the cars, you have the smell of the tires and the fuel, and, just even how fast they go by, blowing the wind and the percussion of the engines. It's such a, all around sensory experience. I think you can go to a racetrack, be able to enjoy it no matter what. The NASCAR, as well as I believe Toyota, they have what's called a mobility pit box. So it's for people with, any kind of low vision, mobility disorders, things like that, to be able to enjoy the race. You can sit on the pit box, watch it from pit road, be able to
Wow.
get that experience. I believe you have to apply for it or you can get a pass through a race team, but there are accessible options like that to be able to see the
Wow.
race from different vantage points. So yeah, I think NASCAR has become very, inclusive in that way. And yeah, I would love for new fans to check out the racetrack. Anytime I could bring a new fan out to a race and they experience it
Yeah.
in person, it's a lot of fun. So make sure you all tune in if you're interested and come check
Right.
out a race.
Well, now they have you as a driver that's rooting for them. They're
Yeah.
gonna root for you too. We all are. We're all gonna be
Thanks.
championing you, especially with your race coming up right now that you're
Mhm.
on the road for.
Yeah.
So as you look ahead, what does the future look like for you specifically, both in racing and in patient care?
Well, I hope to, keep doing what I'm doing. This has been an awesome year and a dream come true for me. I feel like we've gotten our message out to lots of, not just patients, but fans of the sport. I think that everybody knows someone who either has, diabetes or macular degeneration or something that affects vision. So being able to kind of carry this message on a national platform this year, I'm really honored to do it. I think that there's a lot more work that can be done and a lot of ways to sort of amplify the message that we've done this year, and getting, halfway through the season and figuring out what works and what didn't work to kind of promote that message. I've learned a lot, as well as our team. So I'm hoping going forward, I can still, keep racing full time, albeit Daytona in February next year, and ready to go. My practice, they've graciously let me know I can come back and practice in the off season and then race during the season. And yeah, I would continue the juggle as much as possible and try to achieve the most good that we can.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that you're continuing both. That's really cool.
Thank
So
you.
finally, when and where can listeners catch your next race? What does it look like up until November, you said?
Yeah, up until November. So I think we have on race 18, so 13, 14, like about 15 races left this year. They're usually all on Saturdays. So they're on the CW TV channel. So the races usually Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening. And we have practice either on Friday or Saturday morning. So tune into the CW to see all of the races. The ARCA race this weekend is the only exception. So that one's going to be on Friday, and it'll be on the Flow Racing app. So it's a app you can download on your phone. The race will be on there. But otherwise, just remember the CW and look for the Syfovre number 48 car.
Perfect. Well, we all will be rooting you on. Thank you so much for joining us today and for using both your medical expertise and your racing platform to advocate for the blind and low vision community. It was such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, Maddie. Thank you very much for having me on. And thank you for everything that the foundation does. It's been great to learn, more about all of your guys' objectives and what you've done for our community. I go to all the vision walks that you have in Houston. So it was cool to partner up on this level this year, and look forward to collaborating more in the future.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this episode of Eye on the Cure. We'll see you next time. In the meantime, check out our website, www.fightingblindness.org, for the latest info on the research, treatments, events, and how to get in contact with a chapter in your community. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay informed on the latest news and activities from the Foundation.
This has been the Eye on the Cure podcast. To make an impact, donate now at fightingblindness.org.